Hello and welcome. You're watching We the People. I'm Rishika Barua. 700 Indian students are facing the threat of being deported from Canada because their offer letters for admission to Canadian universities were found to be fake. These students sought admission back in 2018 and 19. Now, 5 years ago, many of these victims have paid over 16 lakh rupees each to be able to get their study permits and student visas sorted out. Many of them even managed to complete their graduation and go on to secure work permits. They only learnt of the fake admission letters when they applied for permanent residency in Canada. Now, with their future at stake, these students have now launched an indefinite protest against the Canadian government, demanding the Indian government to also take action. While some students have now received a stay order, others continue to fight. Meanwhile, the mastermind of this scam is still on the run. To put this story in perspective, it is important to understand the numbers, the surge in the number of students going abroad to study year on year. According to government estimates, 11 lakh students are currently studying across 240 countries right now. The United States and Canada, well, they are among the top destinations. These are the two countries where most amount of students are going to. 2 lakh students, Indian students, are in the US and in Canada to study. Now, many of these students invest huge sums of money to be able to study in these countries, all with a hope to be able to find jobs, to be able to secure work permits, and finally to be able to get permanent residency or green cards. Now, it is these students and their families who are most vulnerable. With an 8 to 10% year-on-year increase in the number of Indian students going to study abroad, there is a growing sense of desperation that's evident. The number of students applying for student loans to study abroad, for instance, has increased from around 22,000 students loaned back in 2012-2013 to almost 70,000 student loans in 2021-2022. This is official Finance Ministry data. This also makes students an easy target and more susceptible to fraud. It's the same story with employment scams or marriage scams with Indians going abroad. But on the show tonight, we'll be joined by protesters from Canada. We'll also speak to the education consultants, the immigration experts to help us understand, well, how not to fall prey to such scams. Joining me, Karam Kaur and Sanjay Kumar from the protest site in Canada. We have Adarsh Khandelwal, the CEO of Collegify, Ajay Sharma, author, mentor and immigration expert. We have Varun Singh, who's also an investment and a migration consultant. And we have Mr. Shashikant, former DGP of Punjab. And I'm joined by a young audience here, many of whom have questions about how this scam has happened and are study abroad aspirants themselves. But first, I want to go across to the epicenter of this story in Canada. And let's talk to Karam Kaur and Sanjay Kumar, two protesting students joining us on We the People. Karam, if I can come to you first, and if you can hear me at the moment, explain to us what exactly has happened. Why are you protesting?
ओके सो लेट मी एक्सप्लेन यू फर्स्ट, है ना, कि जिस कॉलेज में हम आते हैं, जिस कॉलेज की ऑफर लेटर हम लेके आते हैं, हम उस कॉलेज में हमने स्टडी नहीं की। हम जब यहाँ पर कनाडा में जब अराइव करते हैं तो हमारा एजेंट हमारे घर पर कॉल करके ये बात बताता है कि हमें उस कॉलेज में नहीं जाना क्योंकि सीट्स फुल है, और हम लोग उस कॉलेज पे नहीं गए। एंड देन उसके बाद हमने कॉलेज चेंज किया, उस कॉलेज में हमने स्टडीज की, उस कॉलेज के ऊपर बेसिस पे हमें वर्क परमिट इश्यू हुआ है, और उसी न्यू कॉलेज के बेसिस पर ही हमने पीआर लगाई हुई है।
ओके, तो जिस कॉलेज में आप गए थे, द कॉलेजेस दैट यू इवेंचुअली वेंट टू वर दे लेजिटिमेट?
नहीं, ये बहुत अच्छे कॉलेज, एसडीएस कॉलेज हैं।
ओके, so Sanjay, if I can come to you, what makes this a one of its kind scam? That for 5 years, 5 साल हो गए आप लोगों को ये डॉक्यूमेंट्स इशू करे हुए, बट 5 सालों में nobody figured out that these documents were fake.
अब आके मैम तब हमारे पास थे ऑफर लेटर, कईयों के पास थे, कईयों ने राइट वे कॉलेजेस चेंज कर लिए थे मैम। और उसके टाइम पीरियड के अंदर जब अपने पास ये सब चीजों के राइट आ जाते हैं, आपको सीट मिल जाती है कॉलेज के अंदर, आप अपनी कॉलेज स्टडी स्टार्ट कर देते हो और अपनी स्टडी कंप्लीट भी कर देते हो, फिर आपको वर्क परमिट भी मिल जाता है मैम। तो आपको कब रियलाइज होगा, आप एक्सपीरियंस भी कर चुके हो और उसके बाद में आप परमानेंट रेजिडेंसी के लिए एलिजिबल भी हो गए हो, तो कहाँ पे पता चलेगा? वो तो मैम उन्हों को ही नहीं पता लगा जब स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट थी, जब अपने दिल्ली से एम्बेसी, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल एम्बेसी में अपने डॉक्यूमेंट्स जाते मैम, वहां पे भी वो चेक कर सकते थे इस चीज को, वो हमें वहीं पे ही रिफ्यूज कर देते। वो हमारे लिए एक डिफरेंट सिनेरियो बन जाता। वहां पे भी चलो समहाउ हम कहीं ना कहीं गलत हो जाते हैं वहां पे। जब हमने उसको हायर ही कर लिया मैम, उसको पता था इन चीजों के बारे में, उसने हमारे साथ में मिसट्रैप किया है। हमारे सारे डॉक्यूमेंट ओरिजिनल हैं, हम एलिजिबल हैं। जब हम किसी और एजेंट से ओरिजिनल गेट कर सकते हैं अपनी एक्सेप्टेंस लेटर, तो वो बंदा ही क्यों हमारे साथ ऐसा किया, उसने ही क्यों किया हमारे साथ।
हमें ये समझाइए कि आपने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट रेज किया कि हाउ डिड द कनेडियन एम्बेसी नॉट हैव फ्लैग्ड दिस, आई मीन हाउ कुड दे नॉट टेल, सो इज दिस देन अ लार्जर नेक्सस दैट वी आर लुकिंग एट?
मैम देयर सम कॉलेजेस जो हमारे साथ में ये सब कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि उनमें से कुछ ही कॉलेजेस के ऐसे नाम आ रहे हैं जिनमें से फेंशॉ, लैम्पटन, कैम्ब्रियन एंड हैंसन, तो ये कुछ ही कॉलेजेस हैं मैम जिनके अंदर वो मिसट्रैप कर रहा है वो बंदा।
तो देन दिस इज एसेंशियली अ नेक्सस।
हाँ जी मैम, उसका है कुछ नेक्सस है या उसका कोई कनेक्शन है, जो वो बंदा एक मतलब कि अपने टाइम पीरियड के अंदर उसको पता है एक स्पेसिफिक टाइम, उसी टाइम वो फाइलों को वहां पे रीच आउट करता है एम्बेसी के अंदर, और वहां पे भी उसका कुछ ना कुछ कनेक्शन है। हमें है उस बंदे के ऊपर डाउट नहीं।
ओके करम, आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, हु डू यू होल्ड रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर दिस? ये किसको आप दोषी ठहराएंगे?
अकॉर्डिंग टू हम अगर सब कुछ देखते हैं तो सारे ही इन्वॉल्व है, इंडिया का एजेंट और जो कनाडा में डील कर रहा था उस टाइम, क्योंकि हमें नहीं पता कौन कनाडा से उसके साथ डील कर रहा था, हमें नहीं पता।
राइट।
एंड IRCC भी कह सकते हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने हमारी फाइल प्रॉपर वे से चेक नहीं की।
राइट भाई, मैं आपसे एक और बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग पहलू है स्टोरी का, मैं आपसे उसके बारे में भी बात करना चाहती हूँ, बिकॉज आई थिंक दैट कंसर्न्स अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल। यू नो, did you take loans to go out and study in Canada? What's your financial situation at the moment and how important is it for this PR to come through? ये आपके लिए कितना जरूरी है कि आपको PR मिले?
तो फाइनेंशियल सिचुएशन सबकी बहुत खराब है, 1.5 साल से हम लोग सफर कर रहे हैं। मोस्ट ऑफ द स्टूडेंट डिप्रेशन में है। मैं 4 महीने से मैं काम पर नहीं जा रही, मेरी फाइनेंशियल सिचुएशन बहुत ज्यादा खराब है। ना मेरे पास रेंट है, ना मैं कह सकती मेरे पास ग्रोसरी का। 4 महीने से मैं ये चीज सफर कर रही हूँ। एंड इवन अब मुझे अगर काम मिलता भी है तो 2 हफ्ते से मैं लगातार प्रोटेस्ट में हूँ।
Sanjay, what is the work situation? What's the financial situation for you at the moment while you're protesting? आपकी क्या financial situation है?
मैम फाइनेंशियली सिचुएशन तो इतनी बेकार हो चुकी है, 1.5 साल हो गए हैं ये केस चलते को, और हम नहीं करते मैम। 12,000 के अराउंड हम लॉयर्स को पे कर चुके हैं, और उनमें से भी हमारे पास फाइनेंशियली सिचुएशन इतनी वीक हो चुकी है कि हम खुद को भी सरवाइव नहीं कर पा रहे किसी चीज को लेकर, और आउट ऑफ स्टेटस हो रखे हैं। इवन उन्होंने हमारे को ये भी बोला हुआ था कि तुम काम भी नहीं कर सकते अच्छे से, मतलब एक ही अगर आप अपना काम भी, हमें को काम से अब हम काम पे नहीं जा रहे तो वो इतना नहीं हमारे को टॉलरेट करेंगे, वो हमें किक आउट कर देते हैं। और इन्होंने CBSA ने ये बोला हुआ था अगर आप काम पे जाओगे तो हमें फर्स्ट इन्फॉर्म करना, आप कहीं भी चेंज कर रहे हो तो हमारे पास, और वो रिप्लाई नहीं जब तक करते हम काम को चूज भी नहीं कर सकते मैम। इतनी फाइनेंशियली हमारी सिचुएशन तो बेकार हो चुकी है इस चीज को लेकर, और हमारे पास कुछ है भी नहीं है ऐसा जो स्ट्रॉन्ग पॉइंट पे हमें ऐसे जिंदा रख के यहाँ पे इतना सर्वाइव करने के लिए।
Okay, Karam, some students have been given relief from the Canadian government, but आपके इस वक्त कनाडा और इंडियन गवर्नमेंट से क्या डिमांड्स हैं?
तो हमारी पहली कनेडियन गवर्नमेंट से डिमांड तो यही है कि हमारी डेपोटेशन रोकी जाए, जो ये हमारे ऊपर जो केस है मिसट्रैप का वो कैंसिल हो, और हमें हमारे लिए कोई पाथवे हो जिससे हमारी परमानेंट रेसिडेंसी की कुछ हो जाए, क्योंकि ऑलरेडी 1.5 साल हो गए, अभी तक हम लोग PR हो जाते, बट द थिंग इज हमारे ऊपर ये केस 1.5 साल से चल रहे हैं।
राइट।
और फ्रॉम द इंडियन गवर्नमेंट हम कहना चाहेंगे कि है ना कि वो इस केस पर इन्वेस्टिगेशन करें, हमारे जो कंसल्टेंट थे उनको पकड़े, उनके ऊपर FIR करवाए, क्योंकि हमें FIR करने जब हम जो जाते हैं तब वो भी मना कर देते हैं पुलिस वाले कि हम कर नहीं पाते।
You know, for the benefit, Karam, of viewers in India, for viewers who are watching this show, for the benefit of the students we have here with us in the studio, many of whom are aspiring to go abroad and study, आप उनको क्या एडवाइस देंगे, क्या नहीं करना चाहिए, क्या रेड फ्लैग्स हैं, क्या एडवाइस देंगे आप aspiring students को?
So the first advice will be कि हमें blindly ट्रस्ट नहीं करना चाहिए, जैसे हम लोगों ने किया, कंसल्टेंट पर इतना ट्रस्ट किया कि हमने उसकी सारी बातें मानी। तो डोंट ट्रस्ट ब्लाइंडली, है ना। कॉलेज में जाके बात करो, कॉलेज पर पर्सनली ईमेल जरूर करो, ईमेल करके अपनी है ना वेरिफिकेशन डन करो, अगर कॉल करो, अगर कॉल नहीं करते तो जो तुम्हारे अगर कनाडा में हमारे है ना कोई फ्रेंड्स हैं या रिलेटिव, उनको कहो कि है ना कि जाके अपना चेक करे, वेरीफाई करवाए, एंड पहली बार जिस कॉलेज में आप आओ उस कॉलेज में अपनी स्टडी कंटिन्यू करो।
राइट, ये एजेंट्स जो है, यू नो, हाउ डिड यू फाइंड दिस एजेंट एंड व्हाट एडवाइस वुड यू गिव टू एनीवन एल्स हु इज लुकिंग फॉर एन एजेंट?
यू कैन चेक कि उनका लाइसेंस अप्रूव्ड है, वो लाइसेंस अप्रूव्ड कंसल्टेंट है, देन यस आप उसे कंसल्ट कर सकते हैं। अगर थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम होती है आप कैनेडियन इमिग्रेशन को आप डायरेक्ट कॉल करके भी पता कर सकते हैं कि प्रोसेस क्या है। इवन सारे गूगल पर लिखा हुआ, पहले तो वो था नहीं बट अब है, सारा कुछ है।
Okay, I think that's useful advice to students. Sanjay Kumar and Karam Kaur, thank you very much for speaking to us on We the People. We wish you all the very best with your agitation, and we sincerely hope that it is the culprits of this scam and not you who are penalized at the end of the day. Adarsh Khandelwal, you know, if I can just bring this to you first to just summarize what we've just heard. I mean, it's absolutely shocking what some of these children are going through. And, you know, a scam of this magnitude, that, you know, these documents, these fake documents being unearthed 5 years after they were actually issued, it's unthinkable.
It's unbelievable, Rishika. I mean, my heart goes out honestly for the students, and I just cannot believe the kind of scenario which these candidates are leading. 700 in number is close to 100 crore rupees fraud, maybe more, right? And at this point of time, right, they went with documentations, and the Canadian government also is responsible. So first come first, it's the responsibility of the Canadian government to secure rights for the students there, right? Because they spent money, they've invested several $100,000. They've waited for a very long period of time, and they cannot be sort of sent back right now, right? So there have to be made, right, whatever legal proceedings to get them in a, more sorted scenario. And from generally for an advice to students, you can't hand over and, give everything and just trust any consultant blindly, right? I mean, I've been in this space for a very long time, and consultants obviously, would take the documents. I don't know why why the consultant was paid 15 lakhs. You should not pay any money. It's like literally giving your bank account, right? You will not share your bank account OTPs with anybody, right? It's similar kind of scenario. Right. You have to be in direct touch with colleges. Colleges will send you direct ID.
Yes, Adarsh Khandelwal, while in principle you're right, if you look at a lot of students, they don't have the wherewithal or the understanding to be able to do this on their own. I want to bring in Mr. Shashikant into the conversation. As someone who's been at the helm of affairs, you've probably dealt with hundreds of such cases, not just pertaining to students. I mean, immigration scam is not a new thing that we're hearing about. But a lot of people fall prey to agents because they don't have the understanding or the wherewithal to be able to carry out admission processes and get in touch with universities abroad on their own. I mean, we're looking at people coming from remote parts of India, many of whom don't even have access to, internet or computers.
Yeah. Basically, I'll use one strong word for this entire episode. It's a can of worms, can of rotten worms. How does it start? If we talk in context of Punjab, kids out here, they just want to go out abroad on one way or the other, and of course the student visa is one of the easiest ways, and they sell off their property. Their entire families are ruined economically.
Right.
I remember 2012 we had started with the concept of making a regulation regarding this travel agents, and in 2014 this regulation was passed. After that, some people, they went to the Supreme Court of India and they said that one of the words which was used, that it amounts to this way or that way, human trafficking. Right. Supreme Court had refused to step into this thing. They said that, well, go to the state authorities and everything. And I was talking to the president of this travel association here. He said that particularly in Jalandhar, they have got 107 registered travel agents. Right. Whereas in practice, there are 1,000 plus such persons who are doing this. So
I think the important point that you're also raising here, is for students to make sure that the person they are dealing with or transacting money with has some kind of a license. Is that correct? You have to look for some kind of a license or a permit to be able to do this kind of work.
Absolutely, you're right. they need to ensure that the person they are talking to has the permit. But again, there is another loophole. We are talking of Punjab. What about other states?
Sure.
The Ministry of Tourism and others say that, well,
Sure.
these are regulatory things. They are not. It's not really law. They say, and lots of persons who don't have license, they have not obtained license, either from the state government or from government of India, are doing this nefarious kind of business.
Right.
So this is how this can of worms starts here.
Okay.
And second, I talked to this Canadian persons also. I've got my friends there at the Canadian government. They said that the embassy just scrutinizes the papers as they are presented to them. And one big loophole in the Canadian system is that once the students land up there, they just don't try to keep any check. And most of these institutions, they are just one-room universities. You go take admission in one-room university, and from there they'll send you to another.
Okay.
So the entire trail is lost.
Right.
So
Can we, we have audience members and several of whom have raised their hands to make a point. You had a point. Go ahead.
What was the Indian government doing when fraud agents lure students in taking admissions abroad? What was the government doing?
Right. Okay. So where does the buck essentially stop? Khushi, you also had a similar question.
Only those who have been the victims are the students who are being punished. But what about the one who has committed this fraud,
right,
and he is roaming from like so many years? But is it the lack of the government or the lack of the laws? Like, he is roaming again and again.
Right. You also had a point.
So my question is, this is like such a big number and we cannot ignore it.
Sure.
So was this how can this huge mistake be taken by the authorities?
Sure.
Was this a mistake or was this a deliberate case of corruption?
Okay.
My question is, Brijesh Mishra was previously arrested in 2014 for forging documents in sending students abroad. Then how did he got the license
again?
Okay. And is it government's mistake or is it the mistake of those students who went again to that same person? They didn't check his authenticity.
Mr. Shashikant, I think several points have been raised here about, where does the buck really stop? And I think a lot of it has to do with awareness as well. But, would you be able to sort of just shed some light on what is the kind of action that is taken on these kind of complaints? I mean, do we have a robust mechanism? Because this is a scam, like others said at the very beginning, that amounts to hundreds of thousands of crores of rupees.
Yeah, one kid stated that this particular person who is involved in this scam, that earlier also he had done it. No action. Now, as per my knowledge, he doesn't have any license, as far as I know.
Right.
He is one of those persons who are doing all these scams. And in this thing, again, the culprit is basically the police, the state government, as also the central government.
Sure.
When such reports are given to the police, they just sit on it, and again, buck stops there, or buck, when I'm talking literally, I'm talking buck means corruption.
Right.
It's basically corruption. And the kids, I just want to tell them, look, if you want to do it, every state is maintaining they've got a portal where they've got the names of the persons who are really authorized to send the kids abroad.
Sure.
Just consult that list before talking to any XYZ. Thank you.
Well, very important that you verify the identity of the individual who you're appointing as your agent or engaging in any money transactions with. Varun Singh, you've written a very interesting piece recently about how this is not just students. I mean, we're talking here about students specifically, the fate of these students that hangs in balance. But you're saying that this has just opened a larger can of worms in a certain sense, because there is employment schemes on the basis of which people are scammed. There are marriage schemes. I mean, there's all kinds of things happening in the name of immigration fraud.
Absolutely, Rishika. This has become an everyday activity where we see similar kind of incidents, and a lot of victims, they come to us, have become victim because of ghost consultants, and they prove themselves that they are doctors and they are giving prescriptions, but they don't have a credibility to do that. And due to lack of awareness, and of course, Sashikant mentioned right that you have to check the credibility, and you should go to the government websites and check that whether this is a registered consultant or not. The biggest problem in this industry is the same thing, is that now you can see this news, but this migrations and the scams of this migrations are happening from ages and decades.
Right.
There are big time players in industry who have been doing this openly, and there is no such regulations and authority who go behind them and check them.
You know, the other really important part that I want to highlight, the important piece of this puzzle, and that's one of the reasons why this becomes a really one of its kind scam that we're talking about, just bringing the focus back to this. Ajay Sharma, you know, you're in fact launching a book on something related to this whole nexus, right?
Relationship, that's right.
Yes, it's not just about students being ill-advised or being scammed by fraudsters or agents. I mean, in order for 700 students 5 years ago to have been able to secure fake letters, they would have had to been a larger nexus. I mean, there would be perhaps a nexus in the embassy, if I may go so far as to say so, and these agents would have had their web even in Canada. I mean, this has to be a larger nexus on the basis of which this scam has gone on for the last 5 years.
See, basically, you're talking of three stakeholders. Let's start with the first stakeholder, students. So I think where the learning from this particular very unfortunate episode is that students, and then specifically in Punjab, there is this particular way of working whereby, you know, they're called packages. That, you know, how is it that these students never got to know that, you know, they got genuine admission or not in a particular college because they paid an X amount and that particular agent did everything. So biggest learning from this episode is the students should only pay directly to college, university, and do to the maximum possible direct communication. And if at all any agent is doing communication on their behalf, ensure that they are kept in CC and informed. So that's one way that students can do. Never pay any agent in bulk. They are only supposed to pay the admission fee, if at all, that also directly to university. Now, the second thing which I really think went wrong here was that I think everybody is questioning that is that the verification, and then students are actually right here, the verification of the admission letter, actually speaking, should have happened at the High Commission level.
Yes.
And that unfortunately did not happen. And whereas the students are absolutely right in stating that had they been refused at that time, and definitely 700 is a big number, they wouldn't be in this unfortunate situation. So I think learning, secondly, I think learning, everybody is learning in the process, even for IRCC and the Canadian immigration agencies, is that I'm sure that they're putting in place more stringent norms to do that. And lastly, I would say that as far as this entire situation is concerned, this is one of its kind unfortunate situation. But overall, students should definitely take precaution. That is the basic responsibility, in my opinion, to avoid such situation lies first with students and parents. Please be cautious to the maximum possible. My last point is that Indian government still doesn't have any policy to regulate immigration consultants and overseas education consultants. So it's high time that Indian government, just like Minister of External Affairs has a policy whereby, you know, anybody doing overseas manpower recruitment must have a license. So the Indian government must come out with a regulatory policy to Parliament which will regulate immigration consultants and overseas consultants.
All right. I think that really is the bottom line, that there has to be a framework, there has to be a method to the madness, some point of verification for students to know that the agents or the process that they are engaging in has a stamp of legitimacy. I want to give the last word to students. Go ahead.
Most of the students went to Canada between 2018 and 2020. I want to ask, the Canadian Embassy did not detect any fake offer letters or verify them with the universities. The lack of verification raises question about the efficiency of the
entire system embassy. Really, there are questions of the entire system here. Go ahead.
Karam, after this incident, countries are now starting rejecting Indian student visas. But due to this, many students who are going to apply for September intake, they are surely going to face problems after this. So, isn't it disgracing the image of India on foreign platforms?
Well, it definitely is. Thank you all very much for your questions. And I sincerely hope that this broadcast has been useful for students and others who are aspiring to go study abroad or live abroad or work abroad. I think there are a whole host of do's and don'ts. We've tried to, scratch the surface of it on We the People tonight. That's all the time I have. Thank you all very much for joining us. Good night.